is Malcolm Tibbetts. I've been a worker of wood since childhood. For the last 30 years or so, I've dabbled in segmented wood turning. Over the years, I've done a lot of bowls and vessels, sculptural forms, and I've done a lot of Christmas tree ornaments. I've done a lot of ornaments such as this donut. Here's another donut with a purple spiral going around. This is stabilized wood. And I thought I'd show a different technique that's not very common. This particular ornament is stave constructed, but it's hollowed out, but not in the conventional way, and that's what I thought would be interesting to show. So if you're into this kind of thing, segmenting, follow along. Hopefully you get something out of this.
So for material, I'm going to use some pink dyed, stabilized maple. These boards are about 9.5 inches long, about 3/4 inch thick, and I've laminated a light colored maple veneer to either side of this pink wood. I've also taken some unstabilized or undyed wood and laminated the same thickness green veneer. So my two different colors, you got the pink and the white with the white veneer and the green veneer. In an attempt to save as much of this expensive stabilized wood, I'm making a diagonal cut approximately from corner to corner, splitting all this material into these wedge shapes. Next, my staves need to be sanded through the drum sander at a very precise angle. To do that, I'm creating these carrying trays with a shim under one side. The thickness or the height of this shim is the critical part of the project that'll create the proper angle on these staves.
So here's the arithmetic on figuring out the shim thickness. My material, my staves, are 1.6 from outside to inside. I want to go to a 0 thickness on the inside. I need to know this thickness. So 2 of these gives me my diameter, 3.2, times pi gives me a circumference of 10.05. 10.05 divided by 16 gives me a width of each segment of 0.63. Therefore, the shim needs to be 0.63. I'm going to run my trays through the drum sander upside down, shaving off a little bit of that shim, do a test with some MDF staves, chop them into little pieces, 16 of them, and test, make an adjustment until I get that shim dialed in at the exact same height that I need under my carrying tray.
To attach my staves to these trays, I'm going to use narrow, about a 1/4 inch wide strips of very sticky double-sided tape. I'll start the sanding process with 36 grit paper on my drum sander, and then for the final passes I'll go to 80 grit. I'm glad I didn't use thicker, wider strips of tape. It's quite an effort to get these off the trays. For the next step, I'm making pairs, just gluing these together, being careful to align the edges. So there's the first step in creating these cylinders, which will eventually be turned into spheres. It's dinner time. I think it's a good time to stop for the day. So it's the next morning, getting these clamps off, go to the miter saw, cut these into about 3-inch lengths, and fit them together, see how accurate the angles are to make my cylinders. Here I'm just knocking the sharp edge off so there's no interference when they're clamped together. You know, testing the 8 pieces, then putting a little dowel on one side in order to clamp these in the half ring technique, using lots of pressure with rubber bands. So the next morning, take them apart, get rid of the dowels, touch them up to the disc sander to have nice flat fits, clamp them with a hose clamp, drill a small hole in the end, which will assist me mounting them on the lathe. The pink stabilized wood is very hard material. Therefore, I'm going to use carbide tools mostly for shaping this. Here I just want to establish what will be the diameter of my sphere. I need this orientation for when I turn the outside of this, as you'll see. I've turned a waist on each one of these 16 halves. I need to determine the center on the inside where I can drill a hole. They don't sit very well to drill a hole, so I'm going to build a little cradle that'll hold them perpendicular to my drill bit. So I've drilled holes that'll fit the screw on my screw chuck, and I'm going to mark the bottoms of these with an outline so that I can remove some of the corner material on my bandsaw before putting these on the lathe to turn the half sphere. The screw on my screw chuck is a little bit too long, so I'm using a little spacer there. I put a little wax on the threads. It just makes the mounting a little easier. These are pretty tough, so I'm going to use a wrench actually to tighten it all the way. So I'm using a carbide tool again. I've got that groove that was turned previously. If I'm really careful and I just turn down to just that groove, I should end up with very close to a perfect half sphere. A few final passes with my tool at a shear scrape position, and I've got all my 16 halves ready for the next step. So in order to turn the inside of these half spheres, I need to build a little jam chuck. This is just stacked MDF. Turning and opening and sneaking up on a fit. You got to turn a little, stop, check, and so forth. And then to make sure I can retrieve these out of the jam, I'll cut a couple of notches so that if and when I need to, I can pry them out of the jam chuck. So using a pencil and then a little bit of tapping, I can get these to run very true. And then to make sure they don't pop out on me, I'll put 4 little dabs of hot melt glue around this edge. Now on the hollowing, the first thing I'm going to do is run a Forstner bit down the middle, shy of how deep I need to go. Just makes it a little easier to hollow them out. My goal now is to turn the inside of this to create about a 1/8 inch wall thickness. And to be accurate, I'll use a little template which I've turned a disc that is about a 1/4 inch smaller in diameter than my sphere. And stopping occasionally to check. So I'll just remove wood and sneak up on a nice fit on that disc. Once I've got a nice fit there, I know I'm pretty close to a consistent 1/8 wall. Most of the hot melt can be removed with this little pointed scraper, and then a screwdriver, a little prying pressure pops it right out. And I'm going to touch these to the disc sander just to true up those surfaces. This masking tape just acts as a handle for me. Just a brief touch to the disc sander. This sander is actually only just coasting. Clean them all up and get them ready to be glued together. The gluing is just a bead of Type-On Original and some rubber bands. On the bottom of the sphere, there's a lot of points coming to the center. They're not perfectly aligned. They look pretty good, but to make them look a little better, I'm going to drill a hole and put a matching colored plug in the bottom. It's a pretty small hole, less than 1/8 of an inch. At the top of the sphere, to create a hanger, I'm drilling another hole a little bigger than 1/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to true up using this other jam chuck with a smaller opening. I'll use my tailstock along with a little cup to hold it in place. Very little material is going to be removed here. This is pretty round, just a few hundredths of an inch maybe to get it back to perfectly round. I didn't shoot any video of the final sanding. I did power sand the surfaces up to 400, And then the two ends, the top and bottom ends, I've enlarged that jamb, put some foam in there, which allows me to sand the ends which were not really accessible. I sign my work. In this case, I'm just putting my first name because these are going to people that know me. Before spraying finish on these, I'm going over them with a well-worn sanding mop, gets all the dust off them, and I'll put them on these little dowels, skinny little things, in order to spray them. I'll probably spray at least 8 to 10 coats, and every few coats I'll go back with the sanding mop and hit them again in between coats. I've got a few small pieces of stabilized wood which I'll use to turn the little doodads at the top in order to hang these. Turned a little tenon, I drilled a hole through, and my one tip I'll give you is drill the hole early so that you can turn away any tear out that occurs. And of course these will get the same application of spray. I don't always buff my work, but because these are going to be handled, they're fairly small, why not? The buffing compound I'm using, I don't even know what it is, I've had it for so long. Now I've got to put the little hanger inserts in. I'm just using a little epoxy, put it in the hole and push the hanger mechanism into place. And the very final step to tie a ribbon on here. Tie a square knot, don't use a granny knot. These are now ready to hang on the tree.
As segmenters, we are constantly challenged to solve what I call the puzzle of construction. What I've shown in this DVD is just one little trick, one more trick to go in your bag of tricks. If you're a solid wood turner, somebody who turns chunks of wood into art, you can do the same thing with a nicely figured piece of wood. Cut it in half, hollow it out, put it back together. Nobody will know how you did it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation. I wish you well and stay safe in those shops.